So I probably should start by saying thank you for all of the Silver Lake love. Devin started my famous career now on the internet. If you've seen the OMA videos, I somehow got featured in those. And now I'm doing my first keynote of my life. So I'm totally feeling the Silver Lake love. I was first here on site way back in 2005 when Silver Lake hosted Console. It was the first time I got to be here. I was a member in discernment in the Pacific Northwest Conference and was in seminary and found my way here that week. So I think I'll start with just a little bit about me and my experience in outdoor ministry. I am an ordained UCC pastor. I serve a local church in Vermont as the associate, so half of my time is youth, the other half of my time is everything else, which is everything else. I grew up in Indiana, so I was a camper at Miram, which is our currently troubled UCC camp there. We actually just got news that supposedly at the end of 2016, the conference is relinquishing ownership of the camp. So sad news there. Moved to Spokane, Washington, and became a weekly dean, using your language, counselor, a dean there. And then I ended up actually during seminary doing a managing director internship. So I got to spend summer there basically learning to be Tim. And then now I'm in Vermont, and so as Tim said, I work with Covenant Hills. I'm a volunteer dean there, but I'm also on the board for Covenant Hills, and I found my way onto the Outdoor Ministry Association board, which is the larger entity that advocates for outdoor ministry within the UCC, but also seeks to network our camps together and more. Now that I've told you a little bit about who I am, I want to tell you who I am not. I'm not an expert. I don't know anything about camp, probably that all of you don't know. But what my hope, and I think a part of what Tim's hope, is that my passion and love for outdoor ministry will be a little spark to give you all some energy and new life to do what you already do incredibly well. So I want to thank you for hosting Abby and I, and now Keaton, and the opportunity to come and to talk with you folks, to engage with you. I know at some level this is preaching to the choir. If you didn't already love camp and outdoor ministry, you wouldn't be sitting here. You wouldn't be giving up an entire week of your summer and all of the weeks that go into the prep to make that week possible. If you already didn't buy in to how incredibly valuable, how life-transforming, how formative camp can be for not only our kids and young folks who come here, but for the counselors who come here, for the folks who work on staff. And I hope as a part of our conversation together today, you're reminded of how transformational it can be for you as deans. How much it can deepen your own faith, how much it has the opportunity to open our eyes anew to where God is moving in your life and in your faith communities that are away from this camp. So my theme for tonight, or my title, Wendy asked this great question, what's your title? And I said, I don't know, let me get back to you. So it's three words. The first one is renewal. And the renewal piece is for all of you, that you will be renewed as people of faith. That in this weekend, this is your chance to do camp, to come and be campers, to not just get the resources you need to go and do the logistics of your week of camp, but this is your chance to have fun with one another. This is your chance to dance and to get that feeling of the joyful presence of God in your life that we want all of our campers to have. This is your chance to do camp. So I hope that in this weekend, as brief as it is, you have the opportunity to be reminded of the life-transforming grace of our God and the way God has moved in your life. And I hope that in our short time together, in our time of worship, in our fellowship with one another, that you'll be reminded of how you have been touched by camp. What has camp done in your life? What has camp changed within you? What are the things that are most important about camp? What is it that brings you back year after year? What is it that wakes you up in the middle of the night as you get ready for your week of camp, it says, I have got to find a way to make sure our campers know this. And it's not verse 47 of John's 13th chapter, but it's that they're loved unconditionally. That it's who they are that God loves. That they are made just perfect in the image of God, regardless of how awkward they feel as middle schoolers, how clueless they feel as elementary school kids, or how sure they are that they have every answer that ever could be offered as high schoolers. God loves them in each of those stages of life, even if you can't figure out how to do it yourself. We want them to know that. So what are those things that you have to relay to your campers, that you can't not tell them? How has camp changed your life? What about camp has transformed you? What about camp has deepened your faith, has given you roots to live the way you do? And I don't want to just ask that question rhetorically. I'm actually going to give you a minute to think about that. Then I'm going to invite you to turn to a couple of people next to you, 2 or 3 folks, and actually share with them, you get 1 minute, to say, how has camp changed your life? What is that transformational thing? What is that gift that camp has given you? You've probably heard the language of the elevator speech. You have that 1 minute in the elevator to sell it. What is that 1 minute speech you would give someone about camp? If they said, why do you go to Silver Lake? What's the point? I mean, I could send my kid to volleyball camp, and it's $50 cheaper. I could send them to YMCA camp that wouldn't happen to be religious, and they have more money, so they have more resources. What is it about a Christian camp that you would sell to a camper or a family in 1 minute? Talk with your neighbors. And so each of you then take a minute and do that. Go for it. I invite you to begin to come back as a group. Yeah. I hope you heard each other's stories in new ways, learned some new things about one another, but also learned about some of the important aspects of Silver Lake that you maybe hadn't articulated yet or thought about. So I'm going to ask you to condense it even more, put it in one word. If you had one word, why is camp important? Why is Silver Lake transformational in your life? Why is it foundational to your faith? And I'm going to write those on the board. So think for a moment, and whenever you got them, shout them out.
Inclusiveness.
Love. Communication.
Might have to go a little slow.
You gotta write that.
Yeah.
Nature.
I'll warn you, I'm dyslexic.
That's pause.
What's it?
Pause.
Pause.
PAWS?
Because she's a big fan of that. Friendship.
Friendship?
Growth.
Growth.
Acceptance?
Yeah.
Service.
Safe.
Inclusive.
Empathy.
Smiles. Unplugging. Authenticity. Prayer.
Opportunity.
Wait, slow down.
Slow. Experimenting.
Defined as in experiencing God.
Purpose.
Purpose.
Peace.
Flexibility.
Did love get up there?
Yep.
Courage.
Love again.
Courage.
Embraced. Fun.
Challenging.
Celebration.
Journey.
Thank you. I hope it might even be worthwhile to take a picture of this before you leave this week, and just maybe even make it a screen on your phone. And for the next several months till you get here for camp, just see this. What is it that you love about camp? When you're having the 40-hour day at week, 40-hour day at work that never seems to end, pop this up. It'll change how your day's going. It'll remind you of how foundational your experience here at camp is and how formational your experience is at camp. Thank you. So our next word is routine. So we started with renewal. Renewing you as leaders, as faith formers, those who are offering young folks of a wide range of ages an entrance into faith. For some of the kids stepping onto this site, this will be the first time they've really heard anything about God. For many of them, even those who go to church, the idea of the Holy Spirit, at best, is something ethereal that they can't put anything to. And probably most of the time, they really haven't had any meaningful discussion of or experience with the Spirit within them, within the world around them, within those they meet. So you really are in a very unique position in people's lives and as a community of faith leaders. I grew up in Indiana. This is like my personal backstory of churches is death right now, because Miriam is closing. The church that I grew up at just closed. That's not the point of this. It just occurred to me that they're both in trouble.
Should we be worried?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was like, okay. So I served a church in Spokane, and it's doing great, so that's okay. But every Sunday, so I have two sisters, and my mom and dad and I, every Sunday we were at church. We never missed Sunday school. One of my grandmas was the Sunday school superintendent. My other grandma was the church musician, and so she would play songs and we would sing before we went to Sunday school. So not a big church, but we were there every Sunday, to the point that when we went on vacation as a family, my sister and I, my sister's a year younger than I, would convince my parents to go, at least we thought we were convincing them, to go to church even while we were on vacation, because we wanted to get perfect attendance in Sunday school. And you could transfer in 2 Sunday school visits at another church, so we could still get perfect attendance if we went during vacation. And so we were in Sunday school all the time. We were in church. We heard the sermons. We had good Sunday school teachers. But it wasn't until the moment that I walked onto Miriam Camp and Conference Center for the first time that my faith went from being something in my head that I learned about to being something in my heart that I lived. It was the first time it came from being something in a book to being something that mattered to who I was and how I lived. It began to put substance to what it meant to be a Christian. It wasn't just something you did on Sunday morning anymore, which is an important part. I'm a local church pastor. Please go to church. Support your churches. But it was at camp for me that those seeds that had been planted at my local church suddenly began to take root. And perhaps it was even a step back from there. Maybe all that was happening at our church was the soil at least had been broken, so that the seeds that were being planted at camp could take root. It was there that, for the first time, I really began to have a sense of what it meant to be accepted unconditionally by a community, regardless of who you are. You wouldn't know it now. But when I was in high school, middle school, and elementary school, I was a bit of a dork. Shh. Quite the peanut gallery. And so I get to camp, and probably, maybe Tim and Ann are probably the only two who have been to Miram. Miram is a pre-Civil War college campus. So there's this huge building in the middle of campus that has this gorgeous 3-story freestanding wooden spiral staircase up to the cupola on top that we actually get to go up, and you can see, not joking, for 100 miles on a clear day. You can see most of the way into Illinois from Indiana. And so this huge, beautiful stone brick building is there, and then all these other buildings. And as my mom's checking me in, I see this kid coming toward me with half of his head shaved. The other half is dyed black hair, like down to his shoulder, and he's carrying a skateboard. And that's not who walked around my church. I mean, that's not what you saw at church. And suddenly, instantly I knew that this was something different. This was a different opportunity. And it was a place to figure out who I was and where God was in my life. It was a place where I at least began to learn about being loved unconditionally. And it didn't matter whether I liked myself or not. It was a place where I learned that I was loved. I was loved by God, and I was loved by these strangers, just because I was a child of God, not because of anything I did or didn't do. It was the first place I really had, perhaps in my whole life, to begin to ask questions. Questions of, so Jesus' mom is a virgin? And God, you're telling me, is out there? This seems fishy. So this is a little odd. There was room to ask the questions. And those, now, silly is not the right question for that, for the right way to describe that kind of question, but it opened the door to ask the deeper questions of meaning. Because when then I would ask that question, they would have the opportunity to say, so what's the truth in this story? Why has this story been told for 2,000 years? It's about that God isn't somewhere out there. God is here among us. So it's actually a great question when those campers say, I don't buy that. This is just a bunch of hooey made-up stories. You can say, yeah, you don't have to buy the story. But the story tells us that God loves us so much. God didn't stay up there in the clouds like they had been thinking for thousands of years. Instead, God came into our lives and continues to come into our lives every day in unexpected and unimaginable ways. To walk with you, to know you, to love you. That's what I got at camp. That's why I think all of you come to camp. And I hope that's what we can offer to our campers who come to camp. In camp, I think regardless of where you do it, it looks different every place you have camp. But I think one of those things that parents don't have a clue is happening at camp is that kids are trying on new hats. They're exploring. Who are they? Who do they want to be? Who are they really, when the world tells them they're someone else? No one at camp knew that I was a dork. No one at camp knew that I was a nerd. They had no clue. I couldn't imagine myself being perceived otherwise, and it took me 2 years to realize no one else knew that. No one else saw me that way. But I said something about it once, and they're like, what are you talking about? And I told them, and they were just like, oh, no. They don't think that of you. You must be wrong. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure. I'm quite certain. Let me tell you what I heard right before school ended. When this became most clear to me as a dean 2 years ago, one of the campers who I'd met a year before at another camp suddenly shows up, and he's I think he was a sophomore in high school, freshman or sophomore, and all of a sudden he's using a Harry Potter accent. And everything he references has to do with Harry Potter. So the first day goes by, and the rest of the campers are kind of like, oh yeah, and occasionally they'd make a comment, but otherwise they weren't worried about it. Day 2 rolls by, and so we have a different setup at Covenant Hills. Our summer staff are the counselors. So it was me as the dean and Elise from Australia. After day 2, she's like, this is a little weird. Is this normal? Do lots of kids like think they're Harry Potter? And I said, I'm sure they do, but not normally at camp. And so day 3 rolls around, and some of the other campers are starting to get frustrated because he is not breaking. Like, he is not relenting. Like, everything is like, Gryffindor to the water! As we're getting ready to whitewater kayak, and he comes up from having fallen out of his canoe, and he's like, I need a sorting hat. This is the wrong canoe. Okay. But as the week went on, we figured out he was trying to figure out who he was. And part of that was moving out of the role of being the older, serious kid in the family. This was his chance to play and be playful, and to, at school, not be told that he's supposed to be the serious one. This was the chance for him to be goofy, to have fun, and to not be made fun of. And by the end of the week, kids who knew nothing about Harry Potter could suddenly join in because they'd learned everything anyone could know about it. And he still writes me. And recently had the conversation of thanks for letting me explore at camp. Because, I mean, a little bit different language, but he knew that he was trying to figure it out. He just didn't know how to figure out who he wanted to be. And that was a part of that journey. And I don't think most parents have any clue that that's one of the greatest gifts that you all allow in campers, is to let them explore in that way. And that leads me into this next piece, that the strengths, the gifts, the most important things about camp are incredibly difficult to articulate. I mean, how do you tell that to a parent? And do you really want to tell that to a parent? That this is their chance for their kids to explore who they are becoming. Who are they in God's eyes? Not just as a kid at school or an athlete or a scholar or both, but who are they as a child of God? Who are they outside of their local church? Who is God to them? Where is the Spirit of God within them? Where is God calling them? One of the things that gets overlooked at camp is how many folks from camp end up doing some kind of formal ministry later in life. This is a place of calling. And we're not always good at taking advantage of sharing that with our campers in a clearly articulated way. Helping them see that they may be having a call. When you see that, it's okay. It's not going to freak them out. It may scare them in the moment, but in the long term, that will be profoundly transformational. Don't pass up those opportunities to say, but I think God is calling you in a unique way that you may not be able to articulate or at least accept at this point. This is a place where seeds are planted. This is a place where seeds take root. Sometimes that's year to year. You plant the seeds one year, and over the course of the school year, those seeds begin to take root. And then the next year, as we pull back the clouds and let the sun shine down on that tilled soil, those seeds that have been watered by the local church, by family, by friends, we get to see that begin to sprout from the ground. We see the blossoming of new life. Sometimes we see that in the course of a week, with a camper who comes in not wanting to be here. And they're sure that they can act in a way that will get them sent home. They know if they push the right buttons, if they say the right things, or usually the wrong things, they'll find a way to not be loved. Another way to know that they are not a child of God. Once more to know that they are not included as one who is loved unconditionally. Once more they will be able to prove that there's something wrong with them. And camp has to be a safe place. We have to have appropriate boundaries. That's incredibly important. But there are also campers who push that boundary within because they are hurting desperately. and that there's nowhere where someone will scream back at them, "I'm right here," when you want to be embraced. When you want to know that God's going to wait on you. God's not going anywhere, and neither am I. And we are here to accept you just as you are and offer a new way of being. The opportunity to be transformed in God's love. And sometimes camp is just about tilling the soil. It's just about breaking ground, giving those sun-baked pieces of earth a little bit of new air. Just breaking them open just enough that the light of God can squeak into those cracks that they don't want to be there. And begin to receive the life-nourishing waters of the Spirit. One of the joys is that campers have those profoundly transformational breakthrough moments at camp. Most people outside of camp never get to witness those moments when the kid cracks. When sometimes that means they break down in tears because they can let the masks aside. They can let their facades down. They can drop their defenses and just be raw with their friends, with God, with adults who will accept them for who they are and will love them, regardless of how broken they think they are. That's one of the greatest joys of camp for me. One of the hardest parts of camp is that most of the work we will do here, we will never see that fruit. And it's one of the hardest parts of being an authorized minister in a camp setting and in the local church, is to work with campers who are not my church kids and youth, and then never get to see the fruit and the way working with my youth and my children at my church, when they go off to college and we send them their care package, they send me a note back that says, "Remember when?" Or I send them a picture of when one of my campers did go to camp with me, and she sends me back like a 3-page email. And all I did was send her a picture when she looks like she's 12, and now she's 21. So we most of the time have no clue of the fruit that comes from our work. So we have to serve in faith to know that we are not doing the work. God works through us. We just need to open ourselves, because the seeds we're planting are not ours. They're nothing we did. There's nothing we can do. God says, here's everything you need. Take it, give it, share it, and then rest in me to know that there are loved ones in the world who will continue to feed and nourish these campers. God's calling. I'm sure there are many of you, or probably most of you sitting in this room, that have been doing camp, have been loving camp for way longer than I have. And so I know there's nothing new I can give you. But I hope, at least for a moment, I can help you listen with new ears to where God is calling you in this ministry. Give you new eyes to see the work you are doing, to soften your heart and lighten your burden as you share the gifts that you have, as you embrace this ministry that you do. As a local church pastor, a couple of pleas that I have for you. 1, don't leave God out. This is a church camp. And it seems obvious, but it's not. So many of our weeks of camp, folks are afraid to talk about God. Because the other 51 weeks of the year, they're not allowed to talk about God. Most of you can't have those conversations at work. Most of you don't want to sit down with your friends and have those conversations because you want to keep your friends. And suddenly you're thrown into this context where you have campers who don't know how to talk about God most of the time, a lot of times had never had conversation about God, and suddenly you're expected to be their pastor, their counselor, their psychologist, their pastoral care director, their spiritual director, and you feel like you're not equipped. Sometimes. Some of you may feel overly equipped, which is great. Lean on each other. You have the resources here to share your faith. That's all those campers need. All they need to know is that you're on a journey too. That you don't have all the answers. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, let's go find somebody who does. Or let's explore that together. What does that question mean for you? Tell me more of that. Why are you asking me that question? What's behind it? Questions are good things. If you can get campers asking questions about what you're sharing with them, about their faith, about who God is, about what the Spirit means, then it's been a successful week. Because if they go home with questions, it means they're at least entering into a relationship. That they're seeking to deepen their relationship. That they're on a journey with God. And as a local church pastor, I would implore you that you can never underestimate the importance of modeling faith. Of modeling what it means to be a person who's in relationship with God. Who's seeking to deepen your relationship with Jesus the Christ. One who's exploring and searching, where is the Spirit in my life? Where is the Spirit moving in the world around me? And where is the Spirit calling me to act? As I said earlier, camp needs boundaries. We have to have those safe things in place that make camp a safe place. But loving campers is one of the greatest gifts you can offer a human being. In appropriate ways, letting them know that they are loved, no matter what. If every camper left camp getting nothing, but knowing that they are loved by God, and that there is a place in this world where they can go that they are loved by people, what else do you need? I mean, really, what else does a camp need to do other than share that as its core? As you live your faith through the week of camp, it will teach campers that God wants them to grow, to learn to ask questions, to love and be loved. And it will teach them, it will show them, it will embody for them that God is calling them to be transformed, to live in a different way, to act differently throughout their lives. And this, of course, is all done a lot easier to say than it is to do. Apparently, it's not that easy to say. It's a lot easier said than done. But you can do it, because that is one of the gifts and strengths of outdoor ministry, is that it takes folks who think that they could never lead a church and that they're not pastors and turns them into formal ministers. All of you are ministers. Ministers on behalf of the Church of Jesus Christ. You are doing ministry here. One of the ways that we can do great ministry is by having solid counselors. Having counselors who can talk about their own faith. Counselors who aren't afraid of questions. You all spend a number of weeks, sometimes the whole year, setting the table for your week of camp. Doing the preparation to set this table. And then there's that moment of getting the counselors. And sometimes it's hours before camp starts. And I totally understand that time crunch to fill those spots with warm bodies, to get anyone you can in here. And sometimes those folks we find are absolutely incredible. But we also need counselors who are on a journey of faith as well, who can think reflectively with our campers and guide them, walk with them, sit with them, laugh with them. So I have this little image that I was thinking about. And here are our beings. Here are all of you. You've set this incredible stage. You've prepared this incredible feast. This is the table of God. You have prepared this incredible meal. The campers all have a seat at this table. Problem is, if there's no legs on your table, you can't be expected to hold up the weight of an entire week's worth of campership without sturdy legs on your table. You need counselors that can support you, that can prepare. You have prepared, literally prepared, the feast of God for these campers. Find ways to get campers, counselors, that can be the foundation in the cabins with those campers, to hold them up, to allow them to just find a seat at the table and eat till they think they're going to burst. Because God's love is abundant. God's grace is abundant. And remind your counselors that God's grace abounds, that they will make mistakes, and that's okay. Questions, thoughts, where are you guys at? Still got a couple minutes. What do you think? Anything? Is this... Okay, well, I'll interlude here. When I finish my sermons at church, we say, any comments, questions? No. We actually ask for feedback from the congregation after the sermons. This is the interlude in the sermon, if you will. Is this connecting? Is this making any sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay. Val, that's when you can shut up. Come on, preach it.
Okay. I think one of the challenges that we have in particular today is that so many of our kids don't come from church experiences.
Yep.
And they're not going to church. And that many of us are involved in churches that are maybe dwindling a little bit, or losing its way, or looks like it's losing its way, or something like that. And it's how do we feed ourselves so then we can feed them, and I think that's a struggle.
Yeah. Thank you.
I can see that. I think in our family we joke quite often that we resemble the Waltons. And I think one of the messages that we took from that series is that reminder that the church is not a building. The church is not a day of week or a time of day. And so being able to connect with unchurched youth is an opportunity to introduce them to the wonder that's around them, and to the point of the questions, allowing them to go ahead and ask the questions, and let's open a conversation, because that conversation doesn't have to happen in a sanctuary. That conversation, in fact, those roots that build far more in the household, in school, on the playground, and hanging out with friends than they do for an hour on Sunday.
One of the newly addressed, I think, in more meaningful ways that camps are wrestling with is how do we make camp a year-round thing. So exactly the question you're asking, and exactly what I think you're responding to, is how is camp, I mean, in some ways camp struggles with the same thing with churches being 4 walls. Camp is 1 week. So there's barriers. The church has had the 4 walls as the barriers. Camp has traditionally had the 6 days or 7 days, whatever, as its barriers. How do we make camp something that goes year-round? And we have new pieces of technology that allow that possibility, but they also allow the possibility for unsafe church to happen too. So how do we find ways to use the new gifts that we have of the world to share the gifts of camp year-round, but to do it in safe ways that are meaningful and appropriate? And camps are beginning to realize, to wake up to the possibility of camp not happening within the boundaries of a physical space, and actually taking it back to the church and taking it back to homes in new ways, which is very important. Thank you. Others? All right. So we have our deans, we have our counselors. Let's see if I can get this to work out. It works straight on paper. And we have our counselors. We've got our deans, we've got campers. We've got our deans, our counselors, our campers, and we have our staff. Together, we're the body of Christ. We are the body of Christ. And if you take any piece of this away, or any piece is hurting, the body of Christ is not complete. You are a vital part of the ministry of God. And you need to be fed. You need to be nourished to serve in the incredible ways you do. You all know something that most of the world will never know. And that's the transformational power of camp. Camp is fundamentally transformational. People who come to camp more often than not leave profoundly changed for the rest of their lives in ways that may take 20 or 30 years in the local church to do. That happens in the course of a week. Most folks who come to camp in some way encounter the transformational love of God in a new way, in a way they never could have imagined before they stepped onto camp. We get to witness the love of God at work. We get to see the way people are fundamentally changed and transformed by our God. Transformation. For me, camp is about offering the opportunity for our campers to be transformed by God, for them to experience grace firsthand. How often is the life of a young person absent of grace? Sports, no room for grace. Academic competition, no room for grace. Music, the place where grace should come alive, often has no room for grace. A family where both parents are having to work 50 hours a week to put food on the table, they want there to be grace. But how can they offer grace to one another when they barely have enough for their campers? This is a place where campers can know that we serve a God of grace, because we can embody that grace for our campers. This is a place where for the first time in their lives, young people might begin to know at the deepest core of their being that they are loved by God just as they are. This is a place where people can learn to receive forgiveness and to offer forgiveness. When people say they're sorry today, and they mean it, how do we respond? We respond with, it's okay, not I forgive you. We've eliminated that word from our language. It doesn't even have meaning to a lot of folks today. How much are many young folks hurting? How much do they need to forgive themselves? What a gift it would be if we gave room for our campers to learn how to forgive others and to forgive themselves for the first time ever. Camp is a place of learning and doing forgiveness. So we started tonight thinking about what is the one thing you would want to share with someone that you've gotten from camp. And so I'd like to end tonight with the other end of that. So we boiled it down to what's the one thing you've gotten from camp? What's the one thing you want to give to your campers? If there was one thing you wanted to make sure that you could give to your campers, what would it be? Start thinking about that. As you're thinking, take one of these stones. So I would get a little bit bigger one so you can write on it. Take one of these stones and keep passing them around. And then pass out these metallic Sharpies that will write on the stone, and you'll be able to see it. So write on your stone, what is the one thing you want to make sure your campers get in your week of camp? What is that one thing? There's only 12 Sharpies or so we'll share, but I think we can. It's another thing about camp, sharing. What is that one thing you want your campers to get? So if you're still working on your stones, as you finish those up, there's a couple of possibilities for what you can do with those stones. And I would actually invite you as a group to make that choice, figure out how you want to do it. One possibility is to put all of your stones together this week and leave them sit together. Actually, regardless, I would invite you to put them together and mark this place. The song that I was playing is by Brian Sergio, who is a lover of outdoor ministry as well, a UCC pastor. And he wrote this song. Do you remember which consult it was for? For one of the consults of the Outdoor Ministry Association about marking the sacred place that is camp, the holy ground upon which we tread. So take your stones and put them together in a pile and a small altar, if you will, to actually mark the sacredness of this ground, this holy ground. And then your choice comes what you do next. You could dig through, and I would invite you as a group to figure this out. You could dig through, find your own stone, carry it with you through the months until you come back to camp. Another would be to pick a stone at random and carry it with you through the months as a reminder of the way all of you are connected, the way you all support one another, are working on the same ministry, but love different aspects of that ministry. Another option is to actually scatter the stones around camp, so that as throughout the summer, you might see one of those stones that has the shiny writing on it, and be reminded of why it is you do what you do. Be reminded of how important the work you do truly is, how transformational it is, how unless you are renewed as leaders, you can't serve to your fullest. And what you are doing is rooting our young people in the love of God, showering them with grace, and offering them a new life in forgiveness. Thank you.